Ubiquity, get your shit together. It is absolutely unacceptable in 2024 to not support IPv6 like the first-class citizen it should be. So for a company that claims to be building the future of IT, you guys really should support at least like the current state of IT. So what prompted this video is that I've been testing a UniFi Dream router for some networking and wireless setups. This includes an access point, a UniFi gateway or router, firewall router, and also a UniFi console, which is what manages their whole shtick. And really, I've been thinking for a while, wondering if UniFi is a good choice for me for wireless. I know it's not a good choice for me for routing and switching, but their wireless stuff, that's like their core business, right? They should be good at that. Maybe. So we're going to go through all the problems I've had getting modern IP to work on this darn UniFi Dream router. So over here, we got our built Y, the Science Fi, and we're running, what is it? I need to show me. UniFi Network 8.0.24. So this is how things look for me. I mean, I'm just doing a test setup so I have my clients. But you can see right away our WAN IP is this. And this is assigned by my test network. I have a router that I can use to test routers. So it assigns a CGNAT address and it also assigns an IPv6 prefix. The prefix is globally routable and it does work, so it should be using it. But I have no idea what it is from the screen, and I have no idea if it even found my prefix or if prefix delegation is even working. Come in here, it's like, oh yeah, 100% uptime. How does it measure health? Well, if we click See All, so we have a legacy address here, but where's our modern address? It's not shown up. And it shows me latency. How does it measure latency? So it says here it measures ping.ui.com. Is that pinging v6 or v4? Spoiler alert, ping.ui.com resolves to 1.1.1.1 and 8.8.8.8. So they're not even running their own ping servers, and they're not v6. Now, both Cloudflare and Google, and Quad9, all support v6 access. They could have added a Quad A record, but they didn't. So our v4 latency is here. We have no idea what the v6 latency is. And in a lot of cases, the v6 latency is better because service provider networks are running v6 primary, and they're tunneling v4 traffic over that for a lot of providers, especially mobile ones. So for a lot of people, v6 latency is slightly better than v4. But we have no idea here what's going on. How about internet settings? Okay, so I got my IP address, my legacy address. What do we got going on? So we got DHCPv4, DHCPv6. Now I will give them this one. It didn't set up DHCPv6 prefix delegation by default. And that is something that a lot of other routers don't always do properly, or if they auto-configure it and there's anything confusing, they just give up. And so my setup uses a /62 delegation, so I get a /60 from Comcast because they're cheap bastards, and I shorten that down to a 62 to give out to my test routers. It is an uncommon size, so I can see how a router would reject that. OpenSense does the same thing when it gets an uncommon size during initial setup. But once I set it up here, it did work. There's no way to see that it worked, but it did work. So like, I don't know, come down here, what do we got? So we got Bill, he's a UDR. So he's got PoE, he's got a legacy address, he's got a MAC address. What about like a modern address? Do you have any modern addresses here? UniFi, you got anything modern? Same with WAN, we got legacy address, we got MAC address. Gigabit experience, what the hell kind of way is that to describe a link negotiation rate? But okay, I guess I have a gigabit experience here. And I have the radios. And again, these two networks, like they don't have any modern addresses, they just have legacy. Insights, maybe that'll give me something. No. Settings. No, that's not helpful. How about White Knight? What do you have? There we go. So we have IPv6 addresses here. So this is the legacy address. And it was able to discover that this client did have v6 addresses, but only found the FE80 and one of the temporary addresses. This thing actually has 4 addresses. I don't know why it did that, but it wanted a bunch of temporaries and only found one of them. So it could do better there. It's probably just a neighbor discovery caching thing. It has to rely on neighbor discovery to see when a host advertises, but at least it can do something. I mean, right? So continuing down on our stuff here, we have our UniFi devices. So this device is an access point, so it counts as a UniFi device that's managed by the console. I don't have any other UniFi devices to test, but so I can't say what their experience would be like, but yeah, so we got legacy address, gig uplink, and in here, same stuff. We've got legacy address, no modern address, just legacy. And like if you're trying to manage a network that does not have v4, this is just not going to work. Clients, what do you have? You have v6, okay. Ports, I wouldn't expect anything here. Radios. I also can't figure out how to set the radio 802.11 type. It seems to be defaulting to N and AX, and I don't know why it's not doing AX on both. Or how it can like disable B and G or things like that. It's not as easy as it should be for advanced settings. And gateway. What do we got going on here? Filtering. Yeah, not a lot of traffic is actually going on my test network. But so at no point have I actually figured out what my IPv6 address and prefix is for my ISP, or what my local LAN segment prefix is. I could have to look at my Windows computer here to see what address it got, to see if v6 is working on the UniFi router. And like, that's a terrible experience. So over here we have some Wi-Fi, we have some networks. So I got two networks here. Again, I show their legacy address. Now I did set them both up with prefix delegation off of WAN, and that works, but I have no idea where to see like what address they actually ended up using. Like, what address did you pick? You got a prefix delegation. You chose a prefix delegation ID. All of this makes sense, but like, where do you like, what's your status? Like, where's your modern IP status? Internet, same thing. This is the screen we saw earlier. So guys, it just gets worse from here. So the whole reason I'm using this thing is because I'm trying to set up a radius authenticated network without breaking my main network, and I needed some stuff that supported Wi-Fi 6 and WPA3. So that's why I have this guy instead of using the MikroTik I've used before, because that one's a pretty old piece of hardware now. They haven't sold it for a couple of years and it doesn't support a WPA3. But that piece of MikroTik still gets firmware updates by them and has proper v6, including v6 only support. So anyway, like this video I did up here, I need to connect to a radius server. And logically, I took the IP address of the radius server. I came over here in profiles, and you click radius. So we're going to add a new radius profile. We're going to call this, I don't know, testnet. We can use it for wired and wireless. And the IP of this server, I'll just type that in. Oh no, this field must be a valid IPv4 address. So my authentication server supports v6. It's set up to, I mean, conceptually I could figure out what the prefix is and add that to the allow list on the radius server. But they won't even take my address here. Like, what's wrong with you? You gotta accept IP address as an IP address box. So I guess there's no radius for me, because I can't get v6 to work on radius. MikroTik did it just fine. So where else does this rabbit hole go? How about VPN? Probably don't want to install an app on my device. I don't really trust UniFi that much after their remote access security breach they just had like a month ago. So let's enable VPN server, and let's do WireGuard. I don't know. Road Warrior VPN, okay. What address can we pick? We can pick our legacy address, but what about our modern address? Why can't I pick both? In OpenSense I can pick both. Why can't I pick both here? How about we enter it manually? What? It got rid of my... There we go. Oh no! We can't bind to a v4 address. That couldn't be a bug with WireGuard, could it? No, WireGuard supports IPv6 just fine. It's a bug in UniFi. So if we go back and we pick WAN, I guess, I don't know, maybe they don't want to bind to two interfaces or something because they're really dumb. How about our client network? Can we give our clients v6 addresses? Now this is a problem with WireGuard. WireGuard has to statically allocate clients, so you can't give them out of a dynamic prefix. OpenVPN is a better choice if you need any sort of management. WireGuard just doesn't manage anything. It's just like, we provide crypto, you're on your own. But here, yeah, so I can do a net mask up to /24 for my VPN. And if you're a decently big company, that's just not going to be big enough for a VPN. You're probably doing client isolation with the VPN. So it shouldn't matter how big the subnet size is. Each one should get their own /32 or /128 and get routed. So like, Why? So we'll just type the address in here. Yeah, no, not a valid IP address. Except it is a valid IP address because it didn't say IPv4. It's a valid IP address. What's wrong with you? And I also can't choose a net mask that's like remotely reasonable. We can auto-generate, and then we get a 192.168, which is great if you want to collide with every other network in the world. Why do you have a broadcast IP on a WireGuard setup? WireGuard is purely a layer 3. There's no layer 2 broadcast domain. Everything is routed. Like, this is bad. How about OpenVPN? Again, I'm stuck on just my legacy address. This is just a nightmare. If I type it in manually, yeah, no, not valid. Doesn't look like it supports radius authentication for OpenVPN, which OpenVPN itself does support, and that's a big reason to use OpenVPN is for user authentication. But no UniFi. They don't support good things. Host addresses again. Yeah, no, they're shitty. Okay, site to site. Maybe you guys can figure your shit out. So we'll use the legacy address. And we're going to do a route based. And we want to add our local network. Actually, this would be the remote side I need to configure here, right? Probably. I don't know. I'm not actually going to run this. And add at least they let me put v6 routes in. I guess that's like the first time v6 has actually worked in the UI. It's remarkable. None of those settings look interesting to me. Okay, so what about WireGuard client? What if my friend has a WireGuard server and we want to peer? Do manual. He is at oh no. Actually, that's the tunnel. Okay, so it looks like it does not support WireGuard with IPv6 in the tunnel, just at all. It supports it on site to site, but like this is a disaster. I don't know how any business could ever want to use this without good v6 support. I'll get to that later. How about, okay, so I can put in an FQDN or I can put a, I can't put a 20 dB8. Yeah, no, so like if my friend buddy guy doesn't have a public v4 address, I just can't connect to him. Like, this is why we have v6 to fix these problems with NAT. Now coming to the security tab, everyone's favorite tab in UniFi because it's awful. How about firewall rules? Let's say I want to block all traffic on port 25. It's not an uncommon thing to do. Let's go here and create entry, internet in, internet out. Okay. And we're going to port group. I have to make a group. And okay. There. So I created a rule that doesn't depend on the IP address, just on the port. And because I put it under internet out, it's just going to work for IPv4 legacy because it's stupid. So I have to create another one on internet out v6. My God, why can't they just like make the rule editor decent? So anyway, in OpenSense, if your rule does not depend on the address family, or if your addresses come from an address list, you don't have to specify v4, v6. It'll just put the rule in the right table. If you have an address list that resolves DNS names, they'll resolve both v4s and v6s, put both of those rules in the right place, all with one rule. Now this can't resolve anything over DNS and its firewall, so it's pretty shit anyway, but it's even more shit because it doesn't support IPv6 properly. And routing. Okay. So I'm going to static route. And we're going to say 64FF9B 96. And you're going to on... This actually worked. This is the first v6 thing that's like worked how I've expected it to. I put in an FE80, gave me the option for a scope. Wow. They did one thing right. So anyway, why am I beating up on UniFi today? Because IPv6 adoption is coming. It's coming very fast, like a freight train. And if your company isn't ready for it, you're going to get crushed. Or some bigger company is going to buy you out and sell all your IPv4 address space to make money. That is a thing that actually happens. IPv4s are worth like hundreds of dollars each right now for a subnet. If you happen to own like a /16, you're looking at like a value of like millions of dollars for your company, just for your v4 address space. And so like someone like Amazon that currently owns like 8/8s, which is like a decent percentage of the internet, yeah, they always want to buy more so they can sell them to their customers. But yeah, back here. So Google and AppNic have different measurement methods for v6 adoption. Google says we are at 45%. And so we're about at the tipping point where there's more traffic than over v6 than over v4, which has been steadily increasing for quite a long time. That's according to Google's measurement method, which is the users that access Google. So this disproportionately affects countries where Google's popular or Google is common. So China has historically been very hard to measure, although the Chinese government has said they want to phase out IPv4 entirely by 2030. The US government, the Department of Defense, wants to phase out IPv4 by 2025. They want to get down to just 20% remaining or so. Not completely, but they want to get it down to a pretty low number, which means essentially most client devices have to be v6 only. Not just v6 enabled, but v6 only in the next couple of years. They've been working on that for a couple of years now. AppNic has probably more accurate statistics, but they're measuring in a bit of a different way, so they have a bit of a broader picture. AppNic is the Asia Pacific Internet Registry, so they manage IP address assignments and AS number assignments in the Asia Pacific region. So they put the US here at 50%, India chopping the targets at 82%. Essentially in India, a single mobile provider enabled v6 and rolled it out across their network, and suddenly India jumped by like 20%. So it doesn't take a whole lot on a country that big for a big change to happen. It's just changing defaults is really all it takes for a pretty big jump to happen. If we scroll down here, their estimate of the world is at 35%, brought down largely by Africa. I guess, I don't know what unclassified would be. What would you say a country is unclassified? It's kind of odd. So on Google's side, we also see another interesting trend. If I zoom in here really close, so we're going through 2023, you'll notice there's spikes here every couple days. And if you actually track those spikes, those are the weekends. So basically, business networks tend to not support IPv6 because the administrators don't care to learn it. Home networks tend to support IPv6 because it's enabled by default on the ISP's modem, as it should be. And mobile operators tend to support IPv6 only. At least in the US, T-Mobile is v6 only. They don't have a v4 service unless you use a different APN. The phone provides v4 service over 464 XLAT, but the network itself is only transiting v6. And so if you scroll down here, so you can see like over the holiday, v6 adoption went up because people were home, they weren't at work. And if I go over here and I go to the US, these guys will show it by AS number and network and things like that. So we can see it has the US currently at over 50%, which is not bad. So in the US, more than 50% of traffic is v6. So if your network doesn't support v6, you're in the minority now. But who is really bringing up this number here? So of the major ISPs, Comcast, AT&T Internet, Cellco. I don't know what who's AS66 or 6167, T-Mobile. T-Mobile, 93% of their devices in the T-Mobile network are IPv6 preferred. So T-Mobile rolled out 464 XLAT. All of their network supports IPv6 only, except for some older APNs. The phone and mobile device are responsible for dealing with that. And Android, iOS, macOS all work perfectly beautifully on a v6 only network. And even Windows will correctly on a mobile network, although they won't do it on Wi-Fi. These guys down here, AS701, that is Verizon. not Verizon Wireless, Verizon Fios. So they're down here at 2%, and they actually were at 50%, but they have a bit of a sad story. So they were rolling out IPv6 a bit late to the party because they should have been doing it, I don't know, back somewhere over here. But they started enabling it by default. Numbers skyrocketed because as soon as a provider enables it by default, rolls that out, suddenly everyone has v6 and it works. And then all of a sudden they changed their mind and turned it back off. And that's because they have a hardware bug in one of their ONTs, optical network terminals. When combining some of their gateways with some of their ONTs, everything gets all broken. So they decided instead of rolling out new ONTs, they're going to just turn it off. But this doesn't mean they turned it off. It means they turned it off by default. You can still turn it on if you use your own equipment, which is why it's down here at like 3% instead of at 0%, because people using their own equipment can still turn it on and still do. But that's why defaults are so important and why a company like UniFi should be defaulting to good IPv6 practices. Because UniFi, let's face it, is not an enterprise platform. They're a small business platform at best. And if you're a small business admin, you're going to set things up the easiest way possible. You're probably not formally trained. Maybe you are. Maybe you're a managed service provider who's formally trained. But a lot of the people that are deploying this are not formally trained, and having good IPv6 defaults would get people a long way. My own ISP Comcast, what do they look like? 82%. So they've been up here above 50% since 2015. They've been above 50%. So that's pretty good. I don't think they're doing bad. T-Mobile too, when did they start skyrocketing? Yeah, so they've been above 50% since, well, basically they went to 464 XLAT. So as soon as they turned on 464 XLAT, boom, they're up to like, yeah, they went down below 50 a bit, and now they're steadily at effectively 100%. So anyway, thanks for kind of my rant about UniFi here. If you have any more UniFi problems, feel free to put them in the comments. I love when it boosts engagement. If you're a UniFi fanboy, make sure you tell me that too, because that boosts engagement too. The algorithm loves that stuff. So yeah, if you like IPv6 content, feel free to join my Discord, stick around. As always, I'll see you guys on the next adventure.